Welcome to One Chapter, One Thought. I'm Pastor Chris from Lincroft Bible Church in New Jersey. Every weekday, I read one chapter of the New Testament and offer one brief devotional thought. Today's scripture reading is from the book of Acts, chapter 25. Festus then, having arrived in the province 3 days later, went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were urging him, requesting a concession against Paul, that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, at the same time setting an ambush to kill him on the way. Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore, he said, "Let the influential men among you go there with me. If there is anything wrong about the man, let them prosecute him." After he spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he took a seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought to him. After Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him which they couldn't prove. While Paul said in his own defense, "I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar." But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges?" But Paul said, "I am before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done nothing wrong to the Jews, as you very well know. If then I was a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true, of which the men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar." Then when Festus had conferred with his council, he answered, "You have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go." Now, when several days had elapsed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and paid their respects to Festus. While they were spending many days there, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There is a man who is left as a prisoner by Felix, and when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it is not the custom of the Romans to hand over any man before the accused meets his accusers face to face and has an opportunity to make his defense against the charges. So, after they had assembled here, I did not delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought before me. When the accusers stood up, they began bringing charges against him, not of such crimes I was expecting, but they simply had some points of disagreement with him about their own religion and about a dead man, Jesus, whom Paul asserted to be alive. Being at a loss for how to investigate such matters, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there stand trial on these matters. But when Paul appealed to be held in custody for the emperor's decision, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I sent him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, "I would like to hear the man myself." "Tomorrow," he said, "you shall hear him." So, on the next day, when Agrippa came together with Bernice, amid great pomp, they entered the auditorium, accompanied by the commanders and the prominent men of the city. At the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said, "King Agrippa, you and all the gentlemen here present with us, you see this man about whom all the people of the Jews appealed to me, both at Jerusalem and here, loudly declaring that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to send him. Yet I have nothing definite about him to write to my lord. Therefore, I've brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the investigation has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems absurd to me, in sending a prisoner, not to indicate also the charges against him." One thought. In the previous chapter, Paul defends himself before Governor Felix in Caesarea. Paul denied the accusations of the Jews that he had caused unrest. Although Felix delayed the verdict, he was hoping for a bribe. Paul remained then in custody for 2 years. After 2 years in prison, Paul's case takes a new turn under the newly appointed governor Festus. Festus hears the accusations against Paul from the Jews, and Paul defends himself again. Notice that Paul is not in conflict with Rome. Throughout the book of Acts, we see that the Romans have largely been friends to the church so far. Paul knows, however, that he must go to Rome, so he appeals to Caesar. Paul made use of an ancient right called provocatio as a Roman citizen, which goes back to the 5th century, and citizens could appeal a magistrate's verdict by a jury of peers. So they get a verdict from the magistrate, they don't like it, okay, you can appeal it, and it would go to a jury of peers. However, when the Roman Empire really transitioned from a republic to an empire and the emperor took over, when you made these appeals, you're appealing to Caesar, and now your case goes before him. So Paul used his citizenship rights in this chapter, and he used the earthly system that was established in the Roman Empire at the time. And really, it's for the purpose of advancing God's mission. God had communicated to Paul in a vision, clearly spoken to him back in Acts 23, that Paul would witness at Rome also. So Paul takes advantage of the legal system set up within the Roman Empire and appeals to Caesar. And I think similarly, as we reflect on Paul's appeal to Caesar, number one, we can trust God's sovereignty, that he's in control. He is writing the story. The book of Acts starts pretty inauspiciously, where the disciples are huddled together in prayer in Jerusalem, and now Paul is almost on his way to Rome. But we can also wisely use earthly systems to advance the mission. Sometimes, I think, as contemporary Christians, we like to complain about the systems of the world. We like to complain about certain systems set up in our country, but we don't always take advantage of the rights that we have for our context as American citizens. Our country has a certain way of doing things, certain avenues available to us as citizens, and also now as Christian citizens, we can take advantage of those things. We can contact our lawmakers, we can seek legislation, we can do all of these things to help advance the mission. And so rather than just feeling this sense of fatalism, we can trust in God's sovereignty and then live our lives, and whatever open doors come to us, maybe it's even through the system of court of appeals, we can use that to help advance God's mission.